let me give you some context that will answer a lot of the other questions in that way. While we mostly do is advertising, I don't present it as advertising as such. I present it as something called demand generation. And the term is very simple. For those of you that have ever experienced working in manufacturing, you know that there's this role that is in charge of the supply chain, right? Someone that, or a group of people or a department that is in charge of making sure that suppliers bring the right materials and that those get transformed in the manufacturing process, and then they get distributed or released to the clients, or sometimes to use distributors, because the manufacturer usually do not sell directly. So that process and that figure is well understood and actually has a name. It's called supply chain. And you will find in some areas that, imagine that the supply chain is like a gear, and that gear only turns when you have this other gear, which is the demand, right? So you have the supply in the form of products and services that a company makes, but you need demand for those products and services. And because if that order wheel doesn't turn, then the supply one will just get a lot of inventory, right? In this case, the manufacturer is trying to fight that. So that demand generation or demand chain has also three processes that make sure that everything runs smoothly. And those are marketing, sales, and customer success. And right, and so if marketing, sales, and customer success work properly and turn that gear, then whatever you make is going to go through the process without issues. And because that chain is known as demand chain, you can call the process of marketing demand generation. And that's the way that I use it here. And while it doesn't apply only to advertising, you can think of channels of advertising as either capturing existing demand or creating it or generating it. And so usually advertising platforms where people search for what you offer, even if they are not searching for you, I will consider that demand capture channels. And any other channel where you are targeting a person without knowing that much about their intent to purchase, I will consider a demand creation channel where you have the opportunity to educate that person or that company from the very beginning, when they are not aware of the problem, they're expressing some symptoms, up to the point where they want to buy from you, or at least they wanna buy the solution that you offer. And that's how we advise clients into deciding between search and social marketing. If there's a healthy amount of inventory or people searching for what you offer, and you have a well-established brand, so when someone sees your ad, will be like, oh yes, this company, I know about them, and they will click on what they're searching for, I would recommend dedicating some budget into capturing demand. So that's paid search. But if what you offer is not that well known, or your company is not well known, or the market is not educated enough, or there's not a lot of people searching for what you offer, then I would advise to display on social media, because you need to build that brand first to be able to build demand both for the category or the product and for your company, if that makes sense. Another thing that is important to know or have in mind is that for almost every product or service, only 1%, 2%, 3%, maybe 5% at most of your potential buyers are searching for what you offer right now. And the other 95%, they are either not aware of it or they are not searching for it in this moment. It doesn't mean that they will not buy eventually, but they are not in market. And that's another trap that is common. I have seen it myself, and that's kind of like a transformation for myself too on the advertising portion, which is it's very easy to focus on capturing demand. It's very easy to focus on paid search because you have intent there, but then you are ignoring these other 95% or 97% of your target market, which when they are ready to search for, you will have not built any brand or any mind share for them for your company. Yeah, and even sometimes it's just, I don't know that I have a problem that can be solved. right? I'm expressing the symptoms, but I'm not formulating in a way that I will search for what are the solutions. And those symptoms usually are complaints or pain points, but they have not formalized into, oh yes, I need this solution, right? Like the problem of transportation. The way that you express it is that I'm wasting time, or it's taking me a long time to move from one place to the other, and that can be solved in so many ways. But so sometimes you're not aware that you're losing productivity there just because you don't have a solution for transporting yourself, to put an example. I will move into this one. It says, Glenda asks if there's one pay media category that creates more value for a brand than the others. And this really depends on your goal. And as I was telling you, there are some campaigns which the goal is not to create any revenue at all. Not in 1 year, not in 6 months, and definitely not in a month. If you have a company that is brand new for a product that is brand new, and you're going to do any advertising at all, and I will cover that portion later because there's a question about that. Most of your efforts are going to be just presenting the company in front of your target market, and the goal there is pretty much reach, right? I want to be seen at least once. So I start building that presence. Sometimes I just want to present the company. Sometimes I want to start to educate that buyer into the problems that probably they're experiencing. And in those cases, the goal is just awareness. And it's very hard to judge the value that is being created because usually we judge that value in form of revenue. And the only way to do that is with the bottom of the funnel, people searching for that usually is paid search. So hopefully that answers the question. But value depends on the goal. If the goal, if you have an audience of 10,000 people that have never heard of your brand, and your goal is to reach 50% of them, then that will be the value that you will create after that campaign. Even if you run it on, LinkedIn or Facebook or any other platform, and you don't get even a click, right? As long as you know that you have reached that have 50% of your population, if that's what you want to accomplish. B2C is a great example of things that, in theory, do not create value immediately, but eventually do. The other one that I also like a lot is the Starbucks. And actually, I'm going to build up on that one because when someone says, well, this activity or this channel is very expensive, like the question that Elisa have here, is it really depends on what you're trying to the value of what you want to get out of the acquisition. So, for example, Coca-Cola and both Starbucks and apply to B2B companies, they make these big investments in a person in particular, right? It's like across all the channels, there's a lot of money, but in one person in particular, it's just a handful of dollars at most. But what will be the lifetime value of a Starbucks coffee consumer, right? Once you sip one of those cups, right? Not everybody, but most people will continue to drink them for years, right? And that's the return on that effort, and the advertising contributes to that. The challenge with advertising channels like the ones that Coca-Cola and Starbucks usually do is that attribution is very hard. But there's a trap on digital because attribution in digital is just as hard, right? There's this illusion that is easier to measure because we have all these tracking things and the cookies and the CRM. But everybody has experience. For example, the one that I use all the time is a podcast. You do a podcast, and you will, in the attribution systems, you will not get a lot of clicks or sessions coming from those activities. But you will get a lot of forms coming from organic and from direct traffic that are a result of people listening to that, even when it's a digital channel. So again, at the end of the day, what makes more sense to compare is your cost of acquisition, which is your ad spend plus your spending on marketing and maybe on sometimes sales, against the value of the client. And that relationship, the return on investment, is the one that will tell you if a channel is expensive or not the cost per click. Yeah. And now trying to build up on Kaylee's question on what industries are more challenging. Now, there's definitely some challenging industries. And they are challenging because of two things, or I tried to set up some of them here. One is when there's a lot of competition, right? So there are channels where a lot of advertisers already are there, and because the way that Google and the rest of the platform works is an auction, bidders push up the price up to the point where it is profitable, but not so much, right? So if you are in an industry where a lot of people advertise already, that competition builds up, and only the ones that get the most out of their investment, right? The ones that get the most of the lifetime value for the same cost of acquisition will consider those campaigns or those efforts profitable, right? If you are a e-commerce company and you sell something that is worth $200 and it costs you $200 to get one client, if you have a terrible service and that's the only purchase that happens after that initial one, then your ROI is not that fantastic. But if you're the kind of company like, I don't know, Zappos or something like that, that once a person buys a product once, it will continue to do so for the foreseeable future, then the same cost will be fantastic for you because it will be 10 times that investment, right? Or referrals, apparel companies like Patagonia, if they know they do advertising, maybe they don't. But those kind of examples are marketing, especially advertising, is the Kindle on a fire, right? If you don't have those wood logs that can sustain it, you will just burn it and it will not be profitable. Now, there are some examples, however, that I can tell you right away. They're quite expensive just because the value of the client is already known to be very high. Like some professional services like lawyers. Now, I will move into what I have organized as audience message offer match. And I will try to answer these questions, but also give you like a general idea of the other big challenge that paid has that organic channels don't have to some extent, right? It's possible to make the same mistake, but it's very hard. When, for example, you create a piece of content that you want Google to index, it's very hard that the piece of content is going to be seen by someone that will not find that content relevant, right? If you, write about a recipe for an apple pie, if you show up at all, you will only show up for people searching for a recipe for apple pie, and that's it, right? You will not show up for swimsuits or for cars, because that's the nature of the platform. And the same happened to some extent to organic content, right? To some extent, whatever you write there will be seen only by followers and the hashtags and all that you have. But that mechanism, while it's incentivized by Google and by social media, is not necessarily enforced 100%. Or if it is enforced, there is a way of simply paying for even if you don't have right match. And so one of the examples that I always use is like, imagine that you look for, on the shopping world, imagine that you look for black dress, men, shoes, and look at the shopping listing, right? All the ads on that, right? That's the only thing that you will see, because this is what is relevant to that, right? And so this is a very silly example, but most of the challenges that companies have when they advertise is that they don't do that match of the offer, which is the choose, against the audience, which is the person that is searching or I want to advertise to, and the message itself, right? So what I mean by the offer is that when I click on this, it will be very silly to be sent to the homepage of Kohl's, because what I was searching for was the dress shoe, right? So the offer needs to match the audience, which is the searcher, and those in between need to match the message. And so a lot of people usually focus a lot into what the message is, right? The image that they're going to use, and the headline and the description and the price and all that, and kind of forget that the offer needs to match the audience, right? That area is a source of problems most of the time. especially on social media, especially in B2B, because there is very easy to cast a very wide network of, I want everybody that has this age or like this topic and is in the whole of the US. And I want to talk about them, my company, and the fact that they can buy from me now when they have never heard of me before, right? So that's one thing that is important to cover here. And with that one is Ellison was asking about, well, what are some of the formats that you can use to engage? And there are many, right? Depends on the platform. You have search is mostly text. Display, obviously, you have images and videos. In LinkedIn, you have text, email, carousel. So it really depends on the platform itself and the way that those ads looks like across channels, right? And trying to build that on that one, again, that is like, this is a common question. There are some unique formats or ads that, like catch more the attention to the buyer. Yes, of course, something new will always be more enticing, right? So if there's a new ad format, a new ad platform, definitely that will catch up the eyes of people, right? Like at some point, banners did many years ago when they were new, or TikTok videos are doing it now. But that will vanish, or that will diminish over time very quickly, the newness of it. And what continues to be important is not how the ad looks like, but if my offer matches the audience. And the other example that I can give you that is not digital is the mail that you get at your houses, right? That is a great example. The audience is, to some extent, measure on the people that live at the house, and look at all the different kinds of messages you get. And some of them are quite simple, and some of them are super expensive, right? They look, the material looks very nice, and the offer is great. But if you are not the right audience, you will just take it and throw it away because it will not match. So if you don't have that thing first, shiny ads will not make a difference. They will catch people's attention. They will talk about them. They will say, oh, that ad looks very well, but they will not act on them because it's not relevant to them. And that builds up into Allison's question, right? It says like, how many times someone needs to see an advertising to interact with it? And the answer is that some users will need just once to see it once. And they will act on your goal. And some of them will need many impressions, and some will never click the ad, right? Either because they will never act upon it, or if they do, they will just visit the website directly. And that might happen to some of you, right? That you see a company from time to time and you never click the ad, but eventually you are ready and you just go and search for them rather than clicking the ad that you saw or the videos that you saw. But the reason for all that is, again, that journey. The people that happens to click on social media just at the first time they see the ad, in part is because the brand is already built up sometimes. But most importantly is because there's a need that needs to be satisfied right now, even from the awareness stage, right? If you ask about someone a pain point that they're actually suffering right now, it will only matter to people that is suffering that pain point right now, and they will click even if they don't buy anything from you. But if your goal was to be in front of people that is suffering the pain point, one impression will be enough. And for others, they will like, this is not relevant to me, and they will not pay attention to it, and they will never do until they feel the pain point. Another example that I give on B2B is there are some products or services that are only bought once a year during the budget season. And so in reality, you can show up that ads for months and nothing will happen because that person, while interested, is not ready to buy because they have to wait for the contract to expire, if any, right? If they are looking for new vendors. But if you wait to show some ads or to have any presence at all until November, it's going to be too late. Another one that I found very interesting is Benjamin's question on at what point in the life of a new business would recommend beginning advertising. This is a very interesting one because people ask me, right? We're a demand generation agency, if we run ads at all for us, right? And I have done it from time to time. But in general, I don't maintain a permanent presence on advertising. And the answer is because it's very similar to a very sophisticated accountant that works with, I don't know, like complex accounting situations. He will say, well, my own accounting is very simple, right? And I work for companies that have an accounting problem that is worth my time or my effort or my expertise. And I don't need my own services for myself. And these kind of translate very well to founders and people that have small businesses. At the beginning, I will say that your most important activity is to build up marketing and sales processes that doesn't scale, right? It is okay to just start talking about your business in person, some live events, joining some groups or organizations. It is okay to don't have a fancy workflow or a fancy remarketing campaign to reach out to someone that has shown interest. Just pick up the phone and call them. Only when you have a lot of content already and presence organically or inorganic, but especially a hungry sales team that is, on top of the leads they're working on, the prospecting that they're doing, they're wanting to they have this large target market, and they want to get access to some of those buyers in companies that are relevant to the company. Makes sense to start doing advertising because it's a way to give them air cover to their efforts, right? If that makes sense. That's what I usually see for B2B. And for B2C, it's similar, right? It's easier in e-commerce to say, well, I have these products and this e-commerce company, and I need to advertise. I'm not an expert in that space, but sometimes I suggest people that rather than building a very complex Shopify store, they start testing their product on established marketplaces like Amazon or any other place where they can showcase and kind of like experience how the delivery works and the questions that people might have and the objections and the flow itself before establishing something of your own that has no traffic and that you need to pay to rent an audience that you don't have, right? There's nothing wrong with starting from the beginning. The only cases where I have seen that is when there's heavy backing, right? So VC money or something that is funded from the start. Yeah, in those cases, definitely advertising helps to scale the effort, but it cannot be the only channel because still you need to say something different than just buy from me. You still need to do the education. You still need to have content worth being distributed by pay channels. Yes, it is. And again, it's both the ad spend itself and the help, right? If you are a smaller company, probably you can still support a full-time marketer. And when you bring that person, they will not only do advertising, right? They probably will have to try multiple channels and see the ones that work for them. And this is the other important caveat. Usually when a company starts, it's not that advertising works better than content or social media. Rather, I think it's better to just have a theory, right? I think these 2 or 3 channels are going to be the best for me, and test each of them ideally sequentially, right? One, and then for a few months, and then the other for a few months, and then the other for a few months. I think there's a book called Traction that covers that portion. And just stick with the one that works, right? The companies that can have the luxury of having content and social media and advertising and influence marketing and live events are the ones that have large marketing budgets, because you need the ad spend, the people, and the technologies to support those efforts. When you're starting, I'd rather choose one marketing channel and one, I don't want to call it sales channel, but one way to sell or close, and just test it for a little while. And then if it works, stick to it and just go deeply in it until you saturate it, and then you jump into something new. On the contrary, that would be fantastic. Depends on where you start. But for example, if you decided to start just in a city, and with Google search, just for a handful of keywords that is your main product, then you can expand to other cities, other products, from high intent to low intent, rather than focusing on someone that is already ready to buy, that is searching for the problems before that search. And obviously you can move into other paid search platforms, which is Microsoft, and some of the others that are presented as social media ones are more really search, like sometimes YouTube we think about as a social media one, but is in reality a search engine, because the advertising show up based on what you're searching for, the videos, to some extent. So you extend it to other platforms and go up the funnel. And in social is very similar. If you discover that you are very successful with Instagram ads for a very small or very narrow population, then you can start expanding out of that into other behaviors and interests that are related, other products. And then if your audience happens to be on Instagram, but also on Pinterest, for example, then you can test in this other platform and go from there. In the event that you, for whatever reason, saturate your advertising budget, and you will see, I will show you example of like companies can spend really a big amount of money on this. You can test other channels like organic, both content and social, of course, and content, to say some, and obviously the real world, right, or the offline world, events, trade shows, all the, launches or similar events. Going back, this question from Tom, like he said, well, a company like Michelin that does very little advertising directly to consumers is somehow missing out. It is a fascinating question, because I wasn't sure. I don't know for the real world. I'm not for sure if Michelin is investing a lot in, like billboards or radio or TV. I don't think it does a lot. Maybe I'm wrong. But I wasn't sure about the digital one. And so I did a very quick research. Let me show you some examples here. And take all this with a grain of salt, because these tools, while, like helpful, they're just approximations. It's not necessarily that they are investing all this money as is showing up here. And so you can see that at some point in July 2020, they were spending $100,000 per month for the US in search advertising, right? They have a great SEO presence. Let me see the organic traffic for them. You can see, and again, take this with a grain of salt, but in theory, the traffic that they're getting organically, if they were to pay for it, right, they're getting it for free from Google. But if they were to pay for it, they will be spending on the line of almost $300,000 per month to get the traffic that they get organically. So they have a big amount of traffic coming organically, and they rank for a lot of keywords. But they are spending also on search here, right? And you can see that there are even some other companies that probably are outspending or spending more than them for some of the keywords that they have some overlap. Yeah. Now, be mindful that most of the traffic that a company will get from organic is most of the time what I call branded organic traffic, which is someone searching for the name of the company but not knowing the URL. A big portion of that is that. And the rest is going to be low intent or research keywords, not buying keywords, right? Like what I call high intent keywords. And most of the advertising at this moment goes for high intent keywords. People that is, a little bit closer on the funnel. So yeah, Tire Rack is investing $500,000 per, actually at some point, it spend $1 million per month. But you can see the type of keywords that they rank or pay for, right? Tires near me for their own brand, probably because there's competition bidding for them too, right? So these are the type of keywords that they will pay for, and they're organic profile probably is slightly different. Let me see. Yeah, so this is a little bit of what I was trying to say. You can see here that they have a ton of volume for their own brand, right? So people searching for their own name, but that will be classified as organic and not direct because they didn't type the URL directly on the browser, right? So they're Michelin. Going back to the question, Michelin is investing. So you see, tire rack. The first non-branded term will be tire shop near me, and discount tire, right? So those are and they are very good though. But you can see, for example, that they are. Let me find one that like this one. I don't know exactly what BBS. Oh, tire rack. No, yeah, this is very relevant. I guess in general. Yeah. Well, but for snow tires, which makes sense, I guess, for snow tires. But you will find some companies that will rank for things that are not near their terms. So that's one of the challenges of organic, of course. But obviously, you get a ton of volume. Now, the other thing that I want to highlight is that they also are paying in LinkedIn for ads. But this one has a different focus. And this is something that I see more and more, which is, again, it's just a matter of everybody's being saturated with organic content, that people find advertising as a way out to even bring talent. So you can see here that LinkedIn page on the LinkedIn page of Michelin, of course, almost nobody is going to be looking on tires on LinkedIn, but maybe there are potential employees. And so their advertising probably are more about, not necessarily just the company itself, but about how it's to work at Michelin, right? So it's more like hiring a talent. That's something that you can use on social networks to attract talent rather than attract clients. And it's the same idea, right? You have to present the right offer to the right audience with the right message. It's no different than clients. And finally, here I cannot see the spending, but just to give you an idea of, you can see all the ads that Michelin has in Facebook. And actually, because obviously they have multiple brands for each country and area, like Iceland and all that. So each of the areas will have different ads in their own language. So they are there. Probably their organic presence is even larger, but they are doing some advertising. Okay. Yeah. Another question that I like it a lot from Sydney is this question of how long do you have to wait to analyze data on advertising in order to, say or usually it's not necessarily I'm having success, but at least to know if I'm going in the right direction. And I'm not a statistician or, someone that knows that space very well, but I just got a handful of things that I know we need to see before making a choice. And clients don't like to hear that, but their budget, their money is the way that we buy data when we are doing advertising. That's pretty much what we use it for at the beginning. So think about this. Imagine that you have 2 keywords or 2 ads or 2 audiences, and you start advertising to both of them, and you want to know which one is working better. And so at the beginning, the only thing that you have are impressions, right? You are reaching out to people and the ad is showing up. And after a little while, someone clicks on the ad. And eventually, most of those visits, someone fills a form or reach out and call you or start a chat conversation, depending on the channels that you have there. And out of that, you create a deal on your CRM, or they start putting some, if you're an e-commerce, they start putting something on the cart and start the buying process. And finally, they purchase from you. And I can extend the example to, and they purchase again, right? They buy more time. And so all that process just takes time. And from the impression point is, if I only have 20 impressions in one ad and 25 impressions in another one, and I have 1 click on each of them, I cannot still make a decision because I have very few data. I don't, there's a tool that allows you to calculate that. My rule of thumb is that I need 300 or 400 data points to compare two sets and say something. For example, if I have 400 impressions and from one ad and another 400 impressions from another ad, now I can look at the clicks, and the one with the highest is called CTR, right? Click-through rate will be the winner for that test with some confidence. I'm making the assumption that everything else is okay. But imagine that you extend that, right? Is that then now if you have clicks or sessions and you want to get leads, then you need hundreds of clicks to make a comparison. And if each click costs you $5, to put an example, then you're talking about hundreds of dollars spending just to get an idea of the conversion rate, which is clicks or sessions against leads. But you wouldn't stop there, because you can get people that fill forms or start chat conversations that don't buy anything or even are not qualified, right? So most of those, not most, but most of those leads, not all, but most of those leads will not buy today, right? Some of them will not buy ever. And most of them, if they buy, it will take some time, especially in B2B, right? Maybe your sales cycle is, 3 months. And so you will need hundreds of those leads and months of following your buying process to compare, for example, two keywords on that. So really, only very large budgets can get those results fast enough. Most of the investments or most of the clients that we have, it takes months to start seeing the patterns. And initially, we only see patterns on impressions and reach, clicks and leads. And it takes months and years to get patterns on qualified leads, opportunities, clients, and size of opportunities. Because you can say something like, I closed this deal, but it's only $100, and this other deal is $5,000, right? And that will bring something to the conversation there. Now, I'm not saying that anyone that has a small budget is doomed. That's where common sense and best practices come along, right? Like, for example, the best example that I have is best practices for landing pages. Yes, you can pay and do complex A/B tests to see what layout of a page work, and if you should have navigation or not, or video or not, and all that. But many people have tested this many times, and they have built up a reservoir of best practices that you can tap from the software and tools that you use every day. If you go to a landing page tool, you will find that the usual layout has a consistency, right? No navigation, clear call to action at the beginning, above the fold, a micro conversion in the form of call us now or a call to action, and then some scrolling to see features and testimonials and all that. All that layout is based on all that testing that already happened. So if you don't have the money or the time or both to do it, just rely on best practices, which is the same thing that I'm trying to say for relevancy, right? As long as you focus on very narrow keywords or very narrow audiences, and you are very specific on your offer and it's tied to the journey, it's okay if you don't have a lot of data or a lot of time to test. You will be fine, right? Because you're following what the best practices that have been built over time. Yes. I want to, this one also I really, really like, because this is another thing that, while expensive, made advertising very interesting compared to organic. And is this question about how granular can you go, right? So I will put you a silly example, but I will put an example on search and another on social, and with that we finish. So in theory, if you wanted to, you can target one term. Think about black dress shoes for one zip code, right? Or a point with a radius of, I think it's 10 miles is the smallest that you can go on Google, that only show up at certain days on certain times, right? Thursday at 10 a.m. On just one type of device, let's say mobile. That's how granular can you go, right? On search. And on the case of display and social, it varies by the platform, but I think the lowest threshold is 100 persons or 100 people, right? You can target as little as 100 people if you confine your terms in a very narrow way. I want people in the US, in this city, or in this zip code, or not zip code, but in this city that are in this age range and have only these interests and have gone to college. And, like you can layer all the terms and you come with a population that is very, very small. That's how narrow can you go also on social. Yes. Now, be aware, however, that all ad platforms are incentivized to not, it's not that not let you do that, but kind of like invite you to spread out your wings, right? Google does it in the form of, they call it broad match, right? And the way that you accomplish what I'm describing here is with something called exact match, which is I just want that term in. It used to be in that order, not anymore, but you are narrowing it down, and you don't want to use display expansion and partner network and all those extra things that they have. And advertising platforms do the same. They want you to go for similar audiences and their own network of display advertisers, and that just dilute your definition, right? The moment that you say people similar to, then it's up to the platform to decide what is similar to what you're defining. And then you lose a little bit of control on that definition. And again, most people think that they need to go after everybody, and usually they are going after too much people, right? Rather than too little. It usually happens on the B2C side. I don't usually work with B2C, but the time that I have worked, for example, only DUI lawyers, right? Only someone searching for DUI lawyers in a specific location, right? Not in the whole of the US, just in one place. That very narrow. These are hundreds of searches or thousands of searches per month. That's it. A very recent one is an event that is called Gran Fondo, that I understand is the equivalent to a cycling marathon, right? And that event happening in just specifically one city. And so only people searching for, like going after that event, not cycling events, not, like just Gran Fondo in this city, and that's it. So those are examples of very narrow. And obviously everything related to products. You can go as specific on, like olive oil or ultra pure olive oil in just one location. Those are the ones that I have seen. Yeah. Or the other one that I have seen is the digital equivalent of when there's a convention and the competitors show up physically there with whatever advertising they might have. For example, if you have the Salesforce event and imagine HubSpot showing up there with some advertising or some billboard there, the digital equivalent of that is if you know there's going to be people in a specific location, a hotel or a convention center, you just advertise to the people that is physically there around these radios, right? You might layer some conditions, but that can be very specific. You just show them ads while they're in that location, and they'll see it on their mobile devices mostly. Oh no, you're welcome. And again, I really appreciate the space and the questions. They are fantastic because they made me think, right, and do some research, and they are fresh. So it has been a fantastic session and opportunity to talk to all of you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I try, coming to that consistency. Unfortunately, I run a series of live events. It's called Demand Generation Studio, obviously, because that's the space that we focus on. So we mostly talk about B2B marketing, but again, specifically just demand generation. And I'm building up what is going to be probably the season number 2 of that at some point next year, because right now we're swamped with work. So I need to make some time for that. Thank you. Nice to meet everybody. And Robbie, as always, thank you for the invitation.